The acid rain had stopped 3 days ago, but the smell still clung to everything. Metal, stone, the few scraps of fabric that hadn't dissolved completely. Eric crouched beside the twisted remains of what might have been a street lamp, his green eyes scanning the horizon through the perpetual haze that shrouded Earth's surface. His fingers twitched against the rifle stock, a pilot's reflex even when grounded. "Still nothing on the scanners," Julia called from behind him, her voice carrying that particular mix of frustration and fascination that meant she'd found something interesting. Her auburn braids swayed as she hunched over a battered tablet, fingers dancing across its cracked screen with practiced precision. "But the energy signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's down there, it's big." Eric's jaw tightened. They'd been scavenging Earth's ruins for 3 months now, dodging radiation storms and the occasional alien patrol that bothered to check on humanity's abandoned homeworld. Most of the galaxy had written Earth off as a wasteland decades ago, when the last refugee ships had fled the dying planet. But something had been calling to them through the static. A signal, faint but persistent, buried beneath kilometers of rubble and ash. "How big?" he asked, rising to his feet with that controlled precision that marked him as someone who'd spent years dodging death in a cockpit. Julia's hazel eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that had gotten them into trouble more times than he could count. "Big enough to power a city? Maybe several cities." She gestured toward the crater they'd been circling for the past hour, a perfect circle of fused glass and metal that stretched nearly a kilometer across. "The readings suggest it's not just intact, Eric. It's active." The wind shifted, carrying with it the acrid taste of ozone and something else, something that made the hair on Eric's arms stand on end. He'd felt that sensation before, in the moments before a hyperdrive engaged or a weapon system came online. Energy, raw and waiting. "We should call it in," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They both knew their small band of scavengers couldn't handle anything this significant, and calling in the authorities meant dealing with the Human Refugee Council, which meant bureaucracy, delays, and the very real possibility that Earth's secrets would be sold to the highest bidder. Julia was already shaking her head, her fingers tugging at her braid, a sure sign she was thinking 3 steps ahead. "The preliminary scans show infrastructure, Eric, not just power sources, but distribution networks, command protocols. This isn't some random alien weapon that got buried. This is human." That stopped him cold. Eric's shoulders straightened, weight shifting forward in the stance that had served him well in a dozen firefights. "Human tech doesn't work like this. We never had anything that could survive what happened to Earth." "No," Julia agreed, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "We never had anything like this that we knew about." She held up the tablet, its screen showing a 3-dimensional map of energy conduits spreading like a vast spiderweb beneath the planet's surface. "But what if we did? What if this is why Earth was really abandoned?" Before Eric could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to hum, not the low vibration of tectonic activity, but something rhythmic, purposeful, the kind of sound that spoke of machinery awakening after a long sleep. Julia's eyes widened, her head tilting in that way that meant she was processing a dozen variables at once. "Eric, the energy spike, it's not random. It's responding to our presence, to our biosignatures." The crater began to glow, faint at first, but growing brighter with each passing second. The fused glass at its center cracked, revealing something that made Eric's breath catch in his throat. A structure was rising from the depths, sleek, organic curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal, but with an underlying geometry that spoke of human engineering pushed to its absolute limits. "Run," Eric asked, his voice steady despite the way his hand had instinctively moved to his weapon. "Not yet," Julia breathed, her fingers flying over the tablet's interface. "The energy patterns, they're not aggressive, they're welcoming, like a greeting protocol." She looked up at him, and for a moment her expression was that of a child seeing the ocean for the first time. "Eric, I think it's trying to communicate." The structure cleared the crater's rim with a sound like glass singing. It stood 30 meters tall, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed to pulse in time with Julia's heartbeat. And then, without warning, it spoke. Not in words, but in images that flooded their minds. Cities rising from barren soil, rivers flowing where there had been only dust, gardens blooming in the shadow of mountains that had been leveled centuries ago, and beneath it all, a vast network of nodes just like this one, waiting to transform a dead world into something that could cradle life again. Terraforming, Julia whispered, her voice filled with awe. It's a terraforming node, and it's not just for Earth, it's designed to work on any world. She turned to Eric, her expression shifting from wonder to determination. Do you understand what this means? We could rebuild, not just survive, but actually rebuild. Eric felt something shift in his chest, a tightness he hadn't realized was there loosening for the first time in years. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. But as he watched the node's light spread across the devastated landscape, he could almost see what Julia saw, Earth as it had been, as it could be again. The aliens won't like this, he said quietly. No, Julia agreed, they won't. The node pulsed once more, and suddenly the air around them was different, cleaner. The acid tang was gone, replaced by something that reminded Eric of the hydroponics bays on the refugee ships. Growing things, living things. That's when they heard it, the low whine of atmospheric engines, still distant but closing fast. Eric's training kicked in, his body dropping into a combat crouch as he scanned the sky. 3 ships running dark but visible against the storm clouds. Alien configuration, Predator-class hunters. They felt it too, he said, his voice hard with certainty. The energy spike, they're coming to investigate. Julia's hands were already moving, her tablet interfacing with the node through connections she was building on the fly. I need time. The node's trying to show me something else. A network map, I think. If I can download the activation protocols. How much time? Eric interrupted, his green eyes tracking the approaching ships. 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the encryption is as old as I think it is. Eric's jaw clenched. The ships would be here in 5. He could feel his pilot's instincts calculating angles, escape routes, the slim chances of survival if they stayed. But he could also see the light in Julia's eyes, the desperate hope that Earth might not be lost after all. Then we hold them off, he said simply. The first ship broke through the cloud cover just as the node's light began to spread across the wasteland, and Eric could have sworn he heard the planet itself beginning to breathe again. The bunker's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, but Eric preferred it to the alien searchlights that had been sweeping the surface for the past 6 hours. He pressed his back against the concrete wall, feeling the vibration as another hunter passed overhead, and tried not to think about how their luck was running out. Got it, Julia whispered from her position at the ancient console, her fingers flying across interfaces that hadn't been touched in decades. The screen flickered, showing a map that made Eric's breath catch. Lines of light stretched across continents, connecting thousands of points in a web that spanned the entire globe. Eric, this isn't just a terraforming network. It's a planetary defense system. He moved to her side, his pilot's eye immediately recognizing the tactical implications. The nodes weren't just scattered randomly, they formed overlapping fields of coverage, with major population centers sitting at the intersection points. Someone built this before the war. Before the war, during the war, maybe even because of the war. Julia's voice carried that rapid-fire precision that meant her mind was racing ahead of her words. The activation logs are encrypted, but the timestamps... Eric, some of these nodes came online during the siege of Earth. They were trying to turn the planet into a fortress. Another ship passed overhead, this one flying lower, its sensor array painting the bunker with targeting radiation. Eric's shoulders tensed, weight shifting forward as he prepared for the inevitable breach. But the ship continued on, and he forced himself to breathe. So what happened, he asked. Why didn't it work? Julia's fingers paused on the keyboard, her hazel eyes narrowing as she parsed the data streams. Because it was never finished. Look at this. She highlighted a section of the network map, showing huge gaps in coverage over the northern continents. They ran out of time. The nodes that were online were overwhelmed, and the system went into hibernation mode. Till now. Until now, she agreed. But Eric, the system isn't just awakening randomly. It's responding to genetic markers. Human genetic markers. It's been waiting for us to come home. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Earth hadn't just been abandoned, it had been prepared, hidden, turned into a trap that would spring only when humanity was ready to reclaim it. But ready for what? His question was answered by the sound of cutting tools against metal. The bunker's main door, 3 meters of reinforced steel, was being carved apart with surgical precision. Eric's hand moved to his rifle, the familiar weight a comfort against the growing certainty that they were about to die. "How long to download the network protocols?" he asked, his voice carrying the calm that had gotten him through 100 combat drops. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Julia's fingers were trembling now, but her voice remained steady. "The encryption is military grade, but it's human military grade. I can break it, but I need time." The cutting sound stopped. Eric counted heartbeats, his green eyes fixed on the door. 1, 2, 3. Then the shaped charges detonated, and the bunker filled with smoke and the acrid smell of burned metal. The first alien through the breach was a scout, sleek, 6-limbed, with compound eyes that tracked movement in the infrared spectrum. Eric's first shot took its center mass, the kinetic round punching through chitin and soft tissue with brutal efficiency. The second alien was heavier, armored, and Eric's shot sparked harmlessly off its carapace before it returned fire with a plasma bolt that turned the air around his head into superheated steam. Julia now would be good, he called over the sound of weapon fire, diving behind a support pillar as more aliens poured through the breach. "I'm in," she replied, her voice tight with concentration. "Eric, the network's not just defensive, it's adaptive. Each node can reconfigure itself based on threat assessment. The one we activated, it's already begun terraforming the immediate area, but it's also building something else." Eric's next shot took an alien in the shoulder, spinning it around but not dropping it. There were too many of them, and his ammunition was running low. But as he prepared for what would likely be his last stand, he felt something change in the air around him. The same sensation as before, but stronger. Energy building to a crescendo. "Julia, what's happening?" "The node's going active," she said, her voice filled with wonder despite the chaos around them. "It's not just responding to our presence anymore, it's responding to the threat." The bunker shook, not from weapon fire, but from something far more powerful. Through the gaps in the ruined door, Eric could see light, not the harsh glare of alien technology, but something warmer, more organic. The sound of the alien weapons died abruptly, replaced by what he could only describe as the sound of the Earth itself groaning as it shifted and changed. "The terraforming process," Julia continued, her fingers still dancing across the console even as she spoke. "It's not just about making the planet habitable, it's about making it defensible. The nodes can reshape terrain, redirect water flow, even alter atmospheric composition in localized areas." Through the breach, Eric could see the alien assault team retreating, their movements suddenly urgent. One of them was speaking into a communications device, its voice a rapid chittering that spoke of confusion and fear. They'd come expecting to find scavengers hiding in ruins. Instead, they'd found a planet that was fighting back. "The network protocols," Eric said, ejecting his spent magazine and loading his last fresh one. "Please tell me you got 'em." Julia's tablet chimed, and she looked up with a grin that transformed her face. "I got them. All of them. Node locations, activation sequences, even the command overrides." She stood, slinging the tablet across her shoulder. "Eric, there are 743 nodes scattered across Earth. If we can activate even half of them, we can turn this planet into a fortress," he finished, understanding flooding through him like cold water. "But first we need to get out of here." The alien voices outside were growing louder, more agitated. Eric could hear the whine of engines as more ships arrived, but he could also hear something else, a deep harmonic resonance that seemed to come from the planet itself. The network was awakening, and it was not going quietly. "There's a service tunnel," Julia said, pointing to a maintenance hatch in the bunker's rear wall. "It connects to the old subway system. We can use it to reach the next node cluster." Eric nodded, but as they prepared to leave, he took one last look at the console Julia had been working on. The screen showed the network map, but now it was different. The nodes that had been dark were beginning to light up, one by one, as signals cascaded through the buried infrastructure. Earth was waking up, and it was remembering what it had been built to do. She paused, her hand on the maintenance hatch. I don't know, but given what I've seen of the terraforming protocols, I don't think they're going to like the answer. Outside, the sound of alien engines was joined by something new, a deep subsonic pulse that seemed to come from the planet's core. The network was spreading, and Eric had the distinct feeling that they were about to start a war that would reshape not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The human enclave had been built in the ruins of what might have been a shopping mall, its broken skylights patched with scavenged metal, and its corridors lined with hydroponic gardens that cast everything in a sickly green glow. Eric counted 37 humans, mostly refugees from the outer colonies, all of them looking at him with the kind of desperate hope that made his chest tight. You're telling us that Earth is some kind of weapon? The speaker was Martinez, a former colonial administrator whose weathered face bore the scars of a dozen evacuation scenarios. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years making impossible decisions, but Eric could see the doubt in his eyes. Not a weapon, Julia corrected, her tablet displaying a three-dimensional projection of the network map. A defense system. The nodes don't just terraform, they can create energy barriers, redirect environmental forces, even alter local gravity fields. She gestured to the hologram, highlighting clusters of nodes around major population centers. Our ancestors built this as a last resort, a way to turn Earth into an impregnable fortress. And it's been sleeping for 3 centuries, Eric added, his green eyes scanning the assembled faces. Until now. The alien ally, who'd introduced itself as Kess, swayed nervously at the edge of the group, its blue-green skin shimmering with patterns that Eric had learned to recognize as anxiety. Its large golden eyes blinked rapidly as it spoke in that melodic voice that always seemed to be asking questions. The fleet commander grows impatient. My people transmitted the energy readings from the first node activation. They believe humans have discovered an ancient weapon cache. Have we? Martinez asked bluntly. Eric's jaw tightened. He'd been asking himself the same question for the past 18 hours, ever since they'd reached the Enclave and found Kess waiting for them. The alien had approached under a white flag, claiming to represent a faction that wanted to end the war. But trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, especially when the stakes were this high. We've discovered something our ancestors left for us, he said finally. Whether it's a weapon or a tool depends on how we use it. The conversation was interrupted by a low rumble that seemed to come from the mall's foundations. The hydroponic lights flickered, and several of the colonists grabbed for handholds as the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Eric's pilot instincts kicked in, his body automatically shifting to maintain balance as he scanned for threats. That's the third one today, Martinez said grimly. Ever since you activated that node, the whole region's been unstable. Some of my people are starting to think we were better off before. The instability is temporary, Julia insisted, her fingers flying over the tablet's interface. The node is adapting to local conditions, optimizing soil composition and atmospheric density. In another few days, this area will be more habitable than it's been in centuries. If we live that long, Martinez muttered. Kess's skin patterns shifted to a darker blue, and its voice carried a note of urgency that made Eric's attention snap to focus. The fleet commander has declared this world a Class 7 threat. They are preparing to sterilize the surface rather than risk the technology spreading. The silence that followed was deafening. Eric felt something cold settle in his stomach as he processed the implications. Class 7 was reserved for planetary threats, worlds that possess technology capable of altering the balance of galactic power. The aliens weren't just planning to destroy the Enclave anymore, they were planning to destroy Earth. How long do we have? He asked. Julia's tablet chimed, and she looked up with an expression that mixed terror and excitement in equal measure. They're going to increase. The node we activated is trying to establish connections with the rest of the network. Each successful link will create another energy spike. She turned to Eric, her hazel eyes bright with desperate calculation. But if we can get to the next cluster and activate it manually, we can control the process, shape it into something defensive rather than letting it spread randomly. The next cluster is 50 kilometers north, Martinez said, through territory that's been occupied by alien forces for the past 6 months. It's a death trap. Eric's hand moved to his rifle, checking the magazine by feel. 3 rounds left. Not enough for a prolonged engagement, but enough to make a statement. Then we don't go through their territory. We go under it. Under it, Martinez frowned. The old subway system, Eric explained. It connects to utility tunnels that run beneath the entire metropolitan area. Julia can guide us using the network map. The tunnels are flooded, one of the colonists protested, and even if we could get through, the aliens have motion sensors covering every surface access point. Not every point, Julia said quietly. Her fingers danced across the tablet, calling up a different map, one showing the node locations overlaid with the city's infrastructure. The network nodes were built to be accessible through maintenance shafts. If we can reach the next cluster, we can activate it from below ground. Eric studied the map, his pilot's eye automatically calculating routes and timing. It was possible, but barely, and it would require them to split their forces, leaving the Enclave vulnerable while a small team made the attempt. "I'll take Julia and 3 volunteers," he said. "The rest of you start evacuating. If we fail, you'll have maybe 6 hours before the bombardment begins." "And if you succeed?" Martinez asked. Eric's expression hardened. "Then we find out what Earth was really built to do." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and goodbyes. Eric selected his team carefully. Quinn, a former Marine who'd fought in the colonial wars. Roberts, an engineer who understood tunnel systems. And Kess, whose knowledge of alien technology might prove crucial. The rest of the Enclave began the grim process of packing their lives into whatever they could carry. As they prepared to descend into the flooded tunnels, Julia caught Eric's arm. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The network protocols I downloaded, they're not just defensive. There are offensive capabilities too. Seismic manipulation, atmospheric disruption, even gravitational lensing." "You're talking about weapons," Eric said. Eric was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. Maybe that's what we need to be. The water in the tunnels was chest-deep and black as ink, but Julia's tablet provided a steady stream of navigation data that kept them moving in the right direction. Behind them, the Enclave's lights faded into darkness. Ahead lay the unknown, a network of sleeping giants that might save humanity or destroy it. But as they waded through the flooded ruins of their homeworld, Eric felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of going on the offensive. Earth was waking up, and it was hungry for a fight. The rival camp squatted in the shadow of a collapsed overpass like a metal tumor against the landscape, its prefabricated walls and guard towers speaking of military precision corrupted by desperation. Eric studied it through his rifle scope, counting defenses and trying not to think about the fact that the people inside were human. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. They'd fought through 50 kilometers of alien-infested territory, only to find their own species waiting to stab them in the back. "We're not here to fight," Eric said, though his jaw was tight with frustration. "We're here to negotiate." The man who'd betrayed them was named Donovan, and Eric had known him for the better part of a decade. They'd served together on the refugee ships, watched each other's backs during the worst of the evacuation chaos. That shared history made the betrayal cut deeper, but it also gave Eric hope that they might find a way through this without bloodshed. Kes's skin patterns had shifted to a deep purple, its large eyes reflecting the kind of fear that transcended species barriers. The fleet commander has moved up the timeline. 2 hours until orbital bombardment begins. My people, they believe humans have become too dangerous to allow survival. Eric's finger tightened on his rifle's trigger guard, but he forced himself to remain calm. Panic wouldn't help anyone now. Then we get those control codes back, and we do it fast. The approach to the camp was surprisingly easy. Too easy, in Eric's opinion. The guards waved them through after only a cursory weapons check, and the path to the central command post was clear of obstacles. It felt like walking into a trap, but they had no choice except to spring it. Donovan was waiting for them in what had once been the camp's briefing room, his broad shoulders filling out a military jacket that had seen better days. The jagged scar across his jaw seemed more prominent than Eric remembered, and his dark eyes held the kind of cold calculation that spoke of decisions made and regretted. "Eric," he said, his voice carrying that booming quality that had once rallied evacuees but now sounded hollow. "Julia, I'd say it's good to see you, but we both know that's not true." "Where are the control codes?" Eric asked without preamble, his green eyes locked on Donovan's face. "Safe," Donovan replied, "along with the lives of everyone in this camp. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've painted a target on every human in the galaxy. The aliens aren't just coming for Earth anymore, they're coming for all of us." "The network is our only chance," Julia said, stepping forward with that mixture of determination and scientific precision that Eric had learned to recognize. "If we can activate the full system, we can start a war that will end with humanity's extinction," Donovan interrupted. "I've been in communication with the fleet commander. There's still time to negotiate. We hand over the network data, demonstrate that we're not a threat, and maybe some of us get to live." Eric felt something cold settle in his chest. "You've been in communication with them." "For 3 days," Donovan admitted, "ever since the first node went active. They're not monsters, Eric. They're scared. Scared of what we might do with that kind of power." "And you're helping them," Eric said, his voice carrying a quiet fury that made Quinn's hand move toward his weapon. "You're helping them destroy the one thing that might save us." Donovan's laugh was bitter. "Save us? Look around, Eric. We're not the heroes in this story. We're the refugees, the survivors, the ones who ran when things got hard. The network might be powerful, but we're not worthy of it." "That's not your decision to make," Julia said, her voice sharp with anger. "That technology belongs to all of humanity, not just the ones who think we should surrender." "Humanity had its chance," Donovan replied. "We lost. Accept it." The argument was interrupted by an alarm klaxon that echoed through the camp's metal walls. Eric's pilot instincts kicked in, his body automatically shifting into a combat stance as he scanned for threats. Through the room's single window, he could see guards running toward the perimeter, their weapons drawn. "What's happening?" he demanded. Donovan's expression shifted from cold calculation to something approaching panic. "They weren't supposed to attack yet. The agreement was 12 hours. "What agreement?" Eric asked, but he already knew the answer. The cold feeling in his chest was spreading, turning into a certainty that made him want to shoot something. "I traded the network data for time," Donovan said. "Time to evacuate the camp, to get our people to safety. But they're here early." Through the window, Eric could see the first alien dropships descending from the clouded sky, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere with predatory grace. The camp's defenses were opening fire, but their weapons were designed for human opponents. Against alien armor, they might as well have been throwing rocks. "The control codes," Eric said, his voice deadly quiet. "Where are they?" "In a secure server," Donovan replied. "Encrypted and transmitted to the fleet commander as soon as you activated the second node. Even if I wanted to help you now, I couldn't." Eric's rifle was in his hands before he consciously decided to draw it, the barrel pointed at Donovan's chest. Around the room, weapons were being raised as the two groups faced off against each other. But before anyone could fire, the building shook as something massive impacted the ground outside. "We need to go," Quinn said, his Marine training overriding the interpersonal drama. "Now." But Eric didn't move. The server location. Give me that, and we might all live through this. Donovan's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on something that might have been regret. Sublevel 3, behind the generator room. But Eric, even if you get the codes back, it won't matter. The network's been offline too long. The nodes are going into permanent shutdown mode. How long? Julia asked, her tablet already connecting to the camp's communication system. 6 hours, Donovan said, maybe less. Eric felt the familiar weight of impossible odds settling on his shoulders. 6 hours to infiltrate a server room, decrypt military-grade encryption, and reactivate a planetary defense network that had been dormant for centuries, and all while dodging an alien assault force that was probably already inside the camp's perimeter. Then we better get started, he said, lowering his rifle. Quinn, you're with me. Roberts, get Julia to that server. Kess, can you delay the attack somehow? The alien allies' skin patterns shifted to a rapid strobe that Eric had learned to recognize as extreme stress. I can try to contact the fleet commander, but they may not listen. My people, they fear humans more than they trust me. Do what you can, Eric said. Then to Donovan, you want to help? Give us covering fire. It's the least you can do. Donovan was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the kind of internal struggle that Eric recognized from his own mirror. I thought I was saving us, he said finally. You can still try, Eric replied. The building shook again, closer this time. Through the window, Eric could see alien soldiers moving through the camp's outer defenses, their weapons cutting through human resistance like a hot knife through butter. Time was running out, and Earth's fate hung in the balance. But as he prepared to descend into the camp's depths, Eric felt something he hadn't expected, a grim satisfaction. They'd been betrayed, outmaneuvered, and probably outgunned. But they weren't giving up, and somewhere beneath the planet's surface, 700 sleeping giants were waiting to wake up. The server room was a technological graveyard, its walls lined with obsolete equipment that hummed with the desperate energy of jury-rigged repairs. Eric crouched behind a bank of processors, listening to the sound of alien boots on metal gratings somewhere above them. The camp's main level had fallen 20 minutes ago, but the attackers seemed reluctant to venture into the sublevels where human desperation had turned maintenance tunnels into kill zones. The encryption's military grade, but it's human military grade, Julia whispered, her fingers flying over the tablet's interface as she worked to crack Donovan's security protocols. I can break it, but I need 15 minutes, maybe 20. We don't have 20 minutes, Eric replied, his green eyes tracking the movement of shadows through the room's single entrance. The aliens are systematic. They'll clear this level within 10. Roberts was positioned at the room's rear exit, his engineer's knowledge of the building's layout making him the perfect early warning system. Movement in the east corridor, he reported, his voice tight with tension. Multiple contacts, moving slow and careful. Eric's jaw tightened. The aliens weren't just attacking, they were hunting, looking for something specific, or someone specific. Julia, can you work faster? I'm trying, she said, her hazel eyes reflecting the screen's glow. But Eric, there's something else. The network protocols I'm accessing, they're not just control codes, they're command overrides. Someone built back doors into the system. What kind of back doors? The kind that would let a single operator control the entire network, Julia said, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and terror. Eric, whoever built this system wasn't just planning to defend Earth. They were planning to use it as a weapon. The implications hit him like a physical blow. A planetary defense network was one thing, a deterrent, a way to protect humanity's homeworld. But a weapon system capable of projecting power across interstellar distances was something else entirely. It was the kind of technology that could shift the balance of galactic power overnight. Can you activate it? He asked. I'm not sure we should, Julia replied. The power requirements alone would be enormous, and the environmental effects… Eric, if we're wrong about the network's stability, we could turn Earth into a radioactive wasteland. The sound of alien voices echoed through the corridor outside, their chittering communication protocols speaking of coordination and purpose. Eric counted at least 6 distinct speakers, probably more. Too many to fight. even with Quinn's military training and Robert's knowledge of the building's defensive systems. "We need another option," he said, but even as he spoke, he knew there wasn't one. The network was humanity's only chance, and Julia was the only person who could make it work. "Got it," she said suddenly, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "The control codes are downloading now. But Eric, the network's in worse shape than I thought. The cascade failure damaged core systems across 3 continents. Even if we can reactivate it, we'll be working with maybe 60% functionality." 60% of a planetary defense network is still more than anyone else has, Eric said grimly. "Can you remote activate the nodes from here?" Julia's expression shifted to that focused intensity that meant she was processing multiple variables simultaneously. Some of them, the ones with intact communication links, but the major clusters will need manual activation. And Eric, the power grid won't support full activation of more than 12 nodes at once. "Then we prioritize," Eric said, "defense first, then expansion." The alien voices were getting closer, and Eric could see movement in the corridor beyond the server room's entrance. Sleek forms moving with predatory grace, their weapons painting the walls with targeting lasers. He had maybe 2 minutes before they breached the room. "Julia, I need those codes now." 30 seconds, she replied, her fingers dancing across the tablet's interface. "The download's almost complete." Roberts' voice crackled over the comm system. "Multiple contacts in the East Corridor. They're moving fast now." Eric's hand moved to his rifle, checking the magazine by feel. Half empty, but he'd scavenged additional rounds from the camp's armory. Enough for a fighting retreat, maybe, but not enough for a prolonged engagement. "Download complete," Julia announced. "Eric, I have control of the network. What do you want me to do?" "Activate the nearest defensive cluster," he said. "Something that can buy us time to get out of here." Julia's tablet chimed, and suddenly the building around them began to hum with power. Not the jury-rigged desperation of the camp's generators, but something deeper, more fundamental. The sound of the planet itself awakening. "Node Cluster 7 is coming online," she reported. "Defensive barriers at 60% strength, environmental controls at 40%. Eric, the aliens' weapons are being affected by the field fluctuations." A blinding flash of light erupted from the corridor, followed by the shriek of tortured metal. The aliens had breached the outer defenses. Eric spun, bringing his rifle to bear, but before he could fire, the ground beneath them lurched violently. Not an explosion, but a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through his bones. "What was that?" Roberts yelled, bracing himself against a server rack. "Node Cluster 7, Julia gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "It's not just activating defensive barriers, it's reshaping the immediate environment. Seismic manipulation, just like the protocols said." Through the shattered doorway, Eric saw a chaotic scene. Alien soldiers were being thrown off their feet as the floor buckled and twisted. Walls groaned, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The targeting lasers on their weapons flickered erratically, their aim thrown off by the sudden shifts in gravity and terrain. It was a battlefield, but the battlefield itself was fighting back. "It's buying us time," Eric shouted over the groaning of the building. "Roberts, cover Julia! Quinn with me!" Quinn, ever the Marine, was already moving, his scavenged alien energy pistol spitting crackling bolts of plasma into the chaotic corridor. 2 alien scouts, caught off guard by the shifting ground, disintegrated in gouts of green light. "They're disoriented," Quinn yelled, reloading his weapon with practiced ease. "But they'll adapt." "We need to get to the main access tunnel," Eric said, checking his rifle. "Only a few rounds left. Julia, can you open a path?" "Working on it," she replied, her fingers a blur over the tablet. "The network's trying to establish a wider connection, but Donovan's interference created so much static. I'm routing power through the old subway lines, hoping to bypass the damaged sections." Suddenly, Kess's voice crackled through their comms, laced with a desperate urgency Eric hadn't heard before. "Fleet Commander, they are deploying ground-penetrating charges. They mean to collapse the sublevels." Eric's blood ran cold. "How long, Kess?" "Less than 5 minutes," the alien ally cried. "They believe the network's core is down here. They will sacrifice their own ground forces to destroy it." "Julia!" Eric barked, ignoring the alien chittering that was growing louder outside the server room. "We need a way out now." "Almost there," she shouted, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The old maintenance shaft leading to the central subway line. It's unstable, but the network can reinforce it. Just a few more seconds, there." A section of the server room wall, disguised as a bank of inactive processors, slid inward with a low hiss, revealing a dark, narrow shaft. Dust motes danced in the dim light, filtering down from above. "Go," Eric ordered. "Roberts, get Julia out of here. Quinn, cover our rear." Roberts grabbed Julia's arm, pulling her towards the opening. She stumbled, but kept her eyes glued to the tablet, still furiously working. Quinn laid down a suppressive fire, forcing the advancing aliens to take cover as Eric followed Roberts and Julia into the shaft. The descent was a scramble, a controlled fall down a series of rusted ladders and crumbling steps. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient metal. Above them, the sounds of battle raged, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of alien heavy weapons. "They're still coming?" Quinn's voice echoed from above. "I'm almost out of ammo." "Keep them off us!" Eric yelled back, his own rifle now empty. He pulled out his combat knife, its worn blade glinting in the faint light. It was a desperate gesture, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. As they reached the bottom of the shaft, they found themselves in a vast, echoing space, a forgotten subway station, its tracks long since buried under layers of sediment and debris. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something clean and vital, like fresh rain. "The terraforming," Julia whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's spreading down here, too. The air quality, it's improving." But there was no time for wonder. The ground-penetrating charges Kess had warned them about began to detonate above, each explosion sending shockwaves through the earth. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and the structural integrity of the old station groaned under the assault. "This way," Julia pointed to a dark tunnel, her tablet displaying a glowing path. "The network's rerouting power to this section. It's creating a reinforced corridor." They ran scrambling over fallen girders and through puddles of brackish water. Behind them, the tunnel they had just exited began to collapse, a roar of falling rock and twisting metal sealing off their escape route. Quinn, his face grim, joined them, his alien pistol now silent. "They're collapsing the whole level," he said, his breath ragged. "We're trapped." "Not yet," Eric said, glancing at Julia. "Julia, those command overrides, can you use them to redirect the network's power? Focus everything on protecting this tunnel." "It'll be a massive drain," she warned, her fingers flying over the tablet. "It could destabilize the entire system, even the active nodes." "Do it," Eric commanded, his voice raw with desperation. "It's our only chance." Julia nodded, her jaw set. She tapped a series of commands, and the air around them shimmered with raw energy. The old subway tunnel began to hum, the sound growing louder, deeper, until it vibrated through their very bones. Cracks in the ceiling sealed themselves, and the crumbling walls seemed to solidify, glowing with an inner light. It was as if the earth itself was flexing its muscles, responding to her will. Above them the explosions continued, but they sounded muffled now, distant. The reinforced tunnel was holding. "It's working," Roberts breathed, his eyes wide. "She's turning the tunnel into a fortress." But the relief was short-lived. A new alarm blared from Julia's tablet, a harsh, insistent tone that cut through the humming of the network. "What now?" Eric asked, his voice weary. "The fleet commander," Kess's voice crackled through the comms, filled with a new, chilling dread. "They are preparing the orbital bombardment, not just ground charges, full planetary sterilization. They believe the network is too great a threat. They will scour Earth down to the bedrock." The news hit them like a physical blow. All their efforts, all their sacrifices for nothing. 12 hours, then 6. Now it was moments. "How long?" Eric asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Less than 10 minutes, Kess replied, its voice trembling. I am sorry, Eric. My people, they are too afraid." A wave of despair washed over Eric. They were trapped, deep underground, with an entire alien fleet preparing to unleash hell from orbit. There was no escape. Then Julia's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. Her eyes, usually so calm and analytical, blazed with a desperate, wild resolve. The command overrides, Eric, the back doors. What if they're not just for defense? What are you talking about? He asked, his mind reeling. The offensive capabilities I found, she practically shouted, her voice rising with a frantic energy. Seismic manipulation, atmospheric disruption, gravitational lensing. What if the network isn't just designed to protect Earth? What if it's designed to fight? Eric stared at her, a flicker of understanding igniting in his mind. You mean turn the planet itself into a weapon? Not just the planet, Julia corrected, her fingers flying across the tablet, pulling up a new complex diagram. The entire solar system. The nodes are interconnected with ancient orbital platforms, dormant satellites, even asteroid defense systems. Our ancestors, they built a doomsday device, a final, desperate measure. A doomsday device, Roberts repeated, his voice hollow. We don't have a choice, Eric said, his gaze fixed on Julia. Can you activate it? All of it? Julia hesitated, her eyes flickering between the tablet and Eric's face. The power requirements, it would be immense. It could tear the planet apart. And if we succeed, if we actually use it, the galaxy will never forgive us. We'd be pariahs, monsters. They're going to sterilize us anyway, Eric said, his voice hard. If we're going down fighting. And if we survive, then we deal with the consequences later. Can you do it? Julia took a deep breath, her shoulders squaring. Yes, she said, her voice firm, but I need to be directly connected to a primary node, the one we activated first, the one in the crater. Eric's heart sank. That's 50 kilometers away, and the surface is crawling with aliens. Not anymore, Kess's voice cut in, a strange, almost triumphant note in its tone. My people, they have begun their retreat. The ground-penetrating charges, they were a feint. They are pulling back to their ships, preparing for the orbital strike. They believe the planet is collapsing. Then we have a window, Eric said, a new surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Quinn, Roberts, with me? Julia, you'll have to guide us remotely until we get there. Kess, can you keep them distracted? Buy us as much time as possible? I will try, Kess replied, its voice now filled with a grim determination. For the sake of peace, and for the memory of what humanity once was. They scrambled back through the reinforced tunnel, the humming of the network a constant companion. The journey back to the surface was a desperate race against time, with the distant rumble of alien engines growing louder with each passing minute. They emerged from a hidden maintenance hatch near the original crater, the air still thick with the acrid smell of ozone, but now tinged with something else. The faint, sweet scent of newly growing things. The crater was a maelstrom of shifting earth and nascent plant life, the activated node at its center glowing with an intensity that made the air crackle. Alien dropships, their hulls scarred by the network's earlier defensive actions, were already ascending, their engines screaming as they fled the awakening planet. We're almost out of time. Julia's voice was strained through the comms. The orbital bombardment sequence has begun. I can see the energy signatures building. Eric looked up, and through a gap in the perpetual haze he saw them. Dozens of alien warships hanging like malevolent stars in the blackness of space, their weapon ports glowing with a terrible gathering light. Julia now, he shouted, scrambling towards the node. I need a direct neural link, she replied, her voice tight with effort. The command overrides are too complex for the tablet alone. I need to be physically connected. Eric cursed. He knew what that meant. The node was designed for a direct interface, a symbiotic connection between human and machine. It was a risk, a massive one. But there was no other way. Do it, he said, reaching the base of the glowing structure. He saw the shimmering interface points designed for human touch. Connect me. Are you sure? Julia's voice was filled with a desperate plea. This isn't just about activating a weapon, Eric. It's about becoming one with it. You'll be the conduit. The network will flow through you. I'm sure, he said, his hand already reaching for the interface. He felt a profound sense of calm settle over him, a strange acceptance of the inevitable. This was what he had been trained for, what humanity had been built for, survival at any cost. His fingers brushed the shimmering surface of the node, and a jolt of pure energy surged through him, not painful, but overwhelming. Images flooded his mind, not just the network map, but the entire planet. He saw the dormant nodes awakening, felt the ancient power grids hum to life, sensed the orbital platforms stirring from their long slumber. He was no longer just Eric, the pilot. He was Earth. "It's working!" Julia cried, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and elation. "The network is going to full power. The orbital platforms are coming online. Eric, you're activating the gravitational lensing arrays." In the sky above, the alien fleet paused, their weapon charges flickering. They had detected the surge of power, the impossible energy signature emanating from Earth. They knew something was wrong. Then Eric felt it. A colossal surge of energy, channeled through him, through the planet, and out into the void. He saw it in his mind's eye, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. The gravitational lensing arrays, ancient and forgotten, were focusing the planet's raw energy, bending space-time, creating a distortion field around Earth. The alien fleet, caught in the sudden invisible current, began to drift, their formations breaking apart. Their weapon charges, meant to scour the planet, dissipated into harmless light as the focused energy of Earth's defense system disrupted their targeting systems. Confusion swept through the alien ranks, their chittering communications turning into panicked cries. "They're trying to escape!" Kess's voice, now clearer, stronger, resonated with a new hope. "They are breaking formation. The fleet commander is ordering a full retreat." Eric felt the immense power flowing through him, the raw, untamed might of a planet fighting for its life. He wasn't just defending Earth anymore, he was pushing back. He saw the alien ships, desperate to escape the gravitational distortions, accelerating to hyperdrive, but the network was affecting even that. Their jumps were erratic, uncontrolled, sending them hurtling into unknown corners of the galaxy, or worse, into the heart of stars. One by one, the alien ships vanished, not in the precise controlled jumps of interstellar travel, but in chaotic flashes of light, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and the silent, watchful stars. The energy surge subsided, and Eric felt the connection to the node lessen, but not break entirely. He was still linked, still feeling the pulse of the planet. He stumbled, falling to his knees, gasping for breath. Julia was beside him in an instant, her hands on his shoulders, her hazel eyes filled with concern. "Eric, are you all right?" He looked up at her, a weak smile touching his lips. I think we won." Behind them, Quinn and Robert stood, their faces pale with shock and awe. The sky above was clearing, the perpetual haze dissipating under the influence of the network's terraforming. For the first time in centuries, the faint light of distant stars was visible from Earth's surface. Days turned into weeks. The network, now fully active and under human control, continued its work. The acid rain was gone, replaced by gentle showers that nourished the newly awakened soil. Rivers flowed again, clear and clean. Green shoots pushed through the rubble, and the air, once acrid and metallic, now smelled of damp earth and growing things. Earth was healing, transforming, becoming a cradle of life once more. The human enclave, now reinforced and expanded, became the hub of a new civilization. Donovan, humbled and remorseful, offered his services, his knowledge of alien communication proving invaluable as Kess, now an official envoy, began the delicate process of negotiating with the remaining alien factions. The word had spread throughout the galaxy. Earth was awake, and it was not to be trifled with. Eric, still linked to the network, became its guardian, its voice. He walked the newly greened lands, feeling the pulse of the planet beneath his feet, guiding its rebirth. Julia, his co-architect, worked tirelessly to understand the full potential of the ancient technology, discovering new applications for its power, not just for defense, but for creation. Humanity had returned home, not as refugees, but as inheritors. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger, tempered by fire. The galaxy watched, wary but respectful, as Earth, the forgotten world, rose again, not as a weapon, but as a beacon of hope, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to die. The war was over, but a new era had just begun, an era where humanity, armed with the power of its own world, would finally take its rightful place among the stars.